Hello,
Sorry.
everybody. My name is John Kranz with Compass Games, and want to welcome Andrew Rader, the designer of Stellar Horizons 2: Galactic Frontier. Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you here today. We are launching your Kickstarter, or perhaps folks are watching this after the Kickstarter has run, and we're making this available online for anybody to watch at any time. So thank you so much for joining us as we're getting ready to launch the Kickstarter for Stellar Horizons 2.
Thank you for having me.
I want you to reintroduce. I know a lot of folks know you already because obviously Stellar Horizons, the first game release, came out a few years ago, won some awards as well. Charles S. Roberts Awards, I'm aware of. I'm sure some others as well. But just by way of reintroduction, if you can share a little bit about yourself for those watching for the first time.
I'm a mission manager at SpaceX. I'm also an avid game player and designer. I've started with Axis and Allies when I think I was 6 years old, and got into hex-based war games after finding some at a garage sale when I was 8 or 9. And so I've been playing games my whole life. I've done a lot of design work for Australia Design Group on World in Flames, which is one of my passions. I go to WIFCons where we play for a week at a time.
Oh, yeah.
Love that. And got into Empires in Arms and all kinds of, huge historical buff. I think my twin passions are history and space and science, and I wrote a book about that, actually, of the history of humanity from the very beginnings into the future, and sort of combining the history and science and space. So those are kind of my passions. I like both, and there's great war games out there, but there's not a lot of really great space games, especially sort of hard sci-fi, so I always wanted to make one of those.
Exactly. And then I think did you write some children's books?
Yes, I have 4 children's books. Epic Space Adventure, a series of, started with a giraffe-astronaut, and it's a group of animals who go out into space and explore the solar system. And I've always been really interested in telling a story of science and the future from the perspective of something that could really happen. I mean, I've always been super into Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, you name it, pretty much every sci-fi that exists. But I've been especially drawn to telling hard sci-fi of how the future might actually look. And so that's what I try to do in my book, and that's what I try to do in my games as well, how the future might look.
Okay, great. And then as far as your current, what you've been doing the past, well, I think you were at MIT, engineering work. That's your education background, I believe.
Yeah, I did a PhD at MIT. I actually have Boston on the back there. It's Bunker Hill. That I was painted when I was in Boston. So I was in Boston for 10 years, and then I went to SpaceX and have a PhD in aerospace engineering and work on current NASA missions, exploration missions, like the next Hubble Space Telescope, which is called the Roman Space Telescope, which is my son's name actually too. Yeah, so I work on that and a bunch of really cool science exploration missions.
So for folks like myself who haven't had the opportunity to go to MIT, what was it like during your time at MIT? Was it more research focused, or how would you describe your experience at MIT and what it's done for your career?
It's really cool. So it is very highly research focused, and I did do a lot of research there as well. But the thing that I would say is kind of different about it is everyone there is super motivated, and also you meet all kinds of really cool people. Like many of my professors were astronauts, or one was the first female fighter pilot on a carrier, so in the Navy. And I met several astronauts, all kinds of big speakers, and Noam Chomsky, I went to one of his lectures, and just like famous names I would get to interact with. It was pretty cool.
Last question I had regarding your time at MIT. Have you found in your professional career, have you been able to reconnect with some of the folks at MIT? Are they in the same field as you? Do you keep in touch, or just curious how that's played out for you in your professional career?
Yeah, many are. Many of the people we work with at NASA have a similar experience, and so I made some contacts with them, and interact with a lot of people I knew before. So it's great. Actually, one of our chief Mars designers on how we will get to Mars and how we will live on Mars at SpaceX, I knew him a little bit from MIT, which is pretty cool.
Okay, and then regarding science fiction, for somebody that isn't deep into the science, do you think there's some good books out there? So if I was interested in reading about exploration and Elon Musk talking about, Mars, colonizing Mars, or we need to have another planet to survive, to help assure our survival, are there any books or literature you would recommend, or perhaps videos you would recommend for those that aren't, as advanced as you are, from a science standpoint?
The thing that got me really interested in the subject of going to Mars was a book called The Case for Mars by Robert Zubrin, which spells out in detail the importance of going to Mars and how we can do it with our current technology. And that's what got me really excited about it. In fact, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say I pursued my PhD and went into my line of work as a result of that book. As a result of reading that book, I kind of had this epiphany reading this book. And around the pool, I remember one summer when I was trying to decide what to do. And I was already in aerospace engineering, but that really got me excited about it. That's The Case for Mars by Robert Zubrin. And there's, if you're looking for science fiction, there's a lot of really good sci-fi. I like sort of hard sci-fi. I think Arthur C. Clarke is pretty much unparalleled. There's Hammer of God is really good. Rendezvous with Rama, that's another really good one. There's Fountains of Paradise, and some of them are super interesting. There's lots of great sci-fi. Some recent one, Kim Stanley Robinson, Aurora was really good. Oh, and one of the best books I've read in a long, long time was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, The Martian.
Okay, great. That's a lot. That's a long list. So I've heard a lot of talk about, again, just the leader of SpaceX. So I'm just the last time I'll mention Elon is he says what's really critical in his mind is when it becomes self-sufficient on Mars, that you're not transporting any more supplies. Mars is 100% fully sufficient, so no more transports from Earth. How realistic? What do you think the likelihood of that is? And you put a timestamp on it. Is it this century? Is it next century? Where we're literally, assuming Earth survives and does no nuclear wars or catastrophes, but if things advance, what do you think the likelihood is that Mars would become self-sufficient at some point?
Yeah, I think something like a century is probably realistic. I actually used a quote in the introduction to Stellar Horizons 1, which is more focused on that near term, going to Mars and setting up a self-sufficient civilization. I used a quote, Earth is too small a basket to keep all of humanity's eggs in. Robert Heinlein, that's kind of the intro text for Stellar Horizons 1.
That's a great quote. Well, listen, this is just the first episode of many that we're going to do here in support of the Kickstarter campaign. So I better get some questions on Stellar Horizons 2. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble here, but I'm just interested in your background. So I wanted to ask you just a few questions there. But let's start with Stellar Horizons. So this is the second game release. Stellar Horizons, I want to say it came out in 2020. I don't know if I got that wrong, but I know it got the award in 2020. Can you give a very high level pitch? So this is for somebody that knows nothing, hasn't heard about Stellar Horizons before, doesn't own the game, maybe hasn't even seen it. Could you give an idea what the system's all about, what you're looking to accomplish with the game?
Yeah, similarly to my career and trajectory and interests, it's kind of, I wanted to know, when I was a kid, I loved Star Trek. And I thought, I was actually really disappointed because we couldn't go around and meet the aliens, right? So I thought, unless we invent warp drive, we'll never kind of go anywhere and have any adventures. Yeah. And when people asked what I wanted to do, I always just said, invent warp drive. And I think, because it breaks the laws of physics, and yeah, it probably won't be out there. This book, The Case for Mars, tells the story of how we would get there, through science. And I wanted to tell the story of how we get to be Star Trek, right? Like how we get to a really advanced thing. Because most science fiction, unless it's kind of dystopian near term like Blade Runner, is way in the future. It's Star Trek. It's already established. It's now we're hopping from star system to star system, and we're meeting aliens and we're having these adventures. But how did we get there, right? And so Stellar Horizons 1 starts with our current technology right now, 2030, which is 6 years away at this point, and kind of gets to, and it progresses. The whole idea is it changes, kind of like Civilization or something. The game Civilization, you start as like in the Stone Age and then get to futuristic technologies, and in the same way, it progresses from our current technology to something that feels very Star Trek-like, but is still within our solar system. And so all of it is plausible with our current understanding of physics and science. And it's, in a sense, the closest one is kind of, what's that sci-fi? The name is escaping me, but anyway, so it's how we get to be Star Trek, and it's so all the technologies are realistic, and it has a tech tree and it sort of really progresses.
Now, on this tech tree, is it all based on mankind's own innovations or the human race, or is it there's elements that exist out there we might not be aware of, or power sources or things, energy out there that we just can't even harness because we don't know it exists? So I'm curious, to get from A to B, is it something that's completely in our control, the human race and the advances we make, or is it something needs to happen there's going to be new elements discovered, new energy sources discovered that don't exist on Earth.
Yeah, the whole premise of Stellar Horizons, I think also this is true of Stellar Horizons 2, but certainly of Stellar Horizons 1, is it's only technologies that we know about that we know could work, but in many cases we haven't perfected them yet. So
Got
for
it.
example, you have cryofreezing. Like we don't know how to safely cryofreeze a human so they could travel through space and get to another planet, but we're pretty sure it could be done, right?
Okay,
Like, so things like that. So,
Okay, makes
and
sense.
fusion, nuclear fusion. We
Yep.
don't really know how to have power positive nuclear fusion, but we're pretty sure it could be done, right? So it's stuff like that. Antimatter is the most powerful form of energy that we know exists. In reality, it actually exists, but we have no reliable way of producing power from it today, but could be done in the future. So those kinds of things that we know exist, but we haven't perfected yet, that is kind of the technological horizon of Stellar Horizons.
Gotcha. So I think you made a comment earlier, and this was regarding Stellar Horizons, that one could look at it as sort of a world in flames, but set in space, or I don't know.
Yeah.
So how would you, so like if somebody didn't have the science fiction gaming background, what approach did you take to Stellar Horizons that maybe I could say, was it like another game system like World in Flames, which you're really into, or?
Yeah, I mean, I actually started with the world because I'd never written a really long rule book before, and I started with the World in Flames rules and and kind of deleted everything, which is
got rid of everything, kept
right?
the space in.
Exactly, yeah. And my friend who we played World in Flames together, he says this is World in Flames in space, and it has. I mean, the turn sequence is similar. I would say almost everything is different. I mean, you don't have World War II aircraft and you don't have infantry, you don't even have a hex map and stuff like that. So almost everything is different. But I think in some game design aspect, it comes from that place of World in Flames. But, you know, I would describe the game as maybe it has sort of a Master of Orion or
Well, it's a lot simpler than it's a lot
Civilization.
similar. I've got the deluxe collectors. I don't know, the huge detergents. You know, I've got the huge detergent size box. I don't know if that's the one you play, by the way. I don't know, with all the modules and the
everything.
deluxe. But that compared to your system, I mean, it's night or day. There's this, you know, 20 pages maybe plus the player's guide. You know, it's in World in Flames. We're talking probably hundreds of. I would assume it's, you know, at least 150, 200 pages if you add it all together.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So I designed Stellar Horizons with the intention of being able to play it in a weekend. And the feedback I got for Stellar Horizons 1 was that still, I think it's too long for most gamers to play a game that takes a weekend to play the whole campaign. You can play smaller scenarios, but I think I find the campaigns the most fun. So for Stellar Horizons 2, I made a deliberate attempt to keep it simpler and keep the rules much simpler and lay out the rules very differently. And I took inspiration from other simpler games to lay out the rules in a way. And there's so many examples and so many pictures in the rules and so many more player, like starts with the player guide. So don't even read the rules. Just
which I saw you did with Stellar Horizons 2 as well. It says on the cover, start with this player's guide first, not the
rules. Yes. So this is especially for Stellar Horizons 2. Yeah, it starts with a player's guide. Just do this, and you'll kind of get a few things, and then you'll learn it over time as we go through this. And so it's late. In fact, no part of this is from, but I kind of used Gloomhaven. I've been playing Gloomhaven. And, and they have, and that's a super complicated game, but they have a version of it called Jaws of the Lion, which is a very simple one where they progress it over time. And I kind of use that approach where it progresses over time and you get kind of led into it as you're learning, right? And so that's the approach I took for how to get into the system. The system, I made a deliberate attempt to make it much simpler than Stellar Horizons 1 as well, and shorter game. So whereas Stellar Horizons 1 was designed to be playable in a weekend, Stellar Horizons 2 is designed to be playable in a day. Still kind of a long game.
I did compare it to Stellar Horizons, and it looks like the rules are less. It does look like a little bit more compact, more approachable. I don't want anybody to think we're talking about a World in Flames.
No.
It's a World in Flames type game that's that complicated. It's nothing like that, but.
Right. It's much simpler than World of Flames. It is deliberately simpler than Stellar Horizons 1, and it also makes a very serious attempt to streamline the rules and make the rules much more accessible, because that was, I think, the biggest complaint I got about Stellar Horizons 1 was the rules. And so Stellar Horizons 2 really has a very serious attempt made to make the rules simple and also approachable. Both of those two things.
Well, let's close with this for the first segment. So this is the preview page before the Kickstarter has even launched. So here we have, as you can see, it's set to clock's set to 0 because we're going to be launching soon. But let's end on this note, and then the next segment will cover, the mechanics, get into the design itself. So give us an overview. How did you approach Stellar Horizons 2? You've already talked about some of the differences, like gameplay time, simpler, more approachable. But just overall, how is Stellar Horizons 2 different from Stellar Horizons? And again, just to underscore, this is a standalone game, so you don't have to own Stellar Horizons, although it will be available as an add-on sale. You can add the original Stellar Horizons 2 as an add-on to this campaign, so you can have both games if you want. But yeah, please share with everybody how your elevator pitch on how Stellar Horizons 2 is different.
So Stellar Horizons 1 was starting with today's technology, and it's answering the question, how did we get to Star Trek, basically. Stellar Horizons 2 is basically Star Trek, except it's Star Trek with current technology that we understand. So plausible near-term technology, I should say. So it's maybe you could think of it like Battlestar Galactica type of level of technology, except without the FTL, because that's the only thing that's unrealistic. So what I started with was a map of all the stars that were nearby, and kind of broke that down into a hex-based map of all the stars we could plausibly reach without faster than light travel. So Stellar Horizons 2 goes right up to the brink of faster than light travel, and I think one of the super advanced technology actually does have like kind of gates, like wormhole gates or something like that. But it is, we're starting on Earth. We're starting effectively, it effectively picks up at the end of Stellar Horizons 1, where we've totally mastered the solar system, right? And this is the step to go beyond the solar system to other stars, which in the long run is super important, because there's tons, there's, I think we decided there's more Earth-like planets in our own galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, than all the humans on Earth. There's billions of Earth-like planets.
That's amazing, which is amazing. That concept blows my mind. And this is covering 800 years, I believe, or nearly 800 years. So a lot's going to happen if we think about what's going to happen. And then if technologies like AI just quickens and just multiply, that force multiplier over 8 centuries. I mean, oh my God, I can't even imagine what that would look like.
Yeah, so there's two reasons why it spans such a long time frame. One is because I am generally not assuming faster than light travel. That means you cannot travel faster than the speed of light. So a star, the nearest stars are about 5 light years away, like Alpha Centauri, 4.5 light years away. So the absolute fastest you could possibly travel there is about 5 years. And at the start of the game, it takes longer than that. It takes kind of like 50 years or something like that. So one of the reasons is because you need a long time to travel between stars. And this was, I mean, I read this book about 20 years ago, but there was a book by Robert Zubrin, also Case for Mars, about what commerce would be like between stars, and mapping out the physics and the math of what would actually make sense in terms of interstellar trade. And so you need to, in order to go to different stars, you need many years. And so that's why each turn in Stellar Horizons 2 is a decade. So as in Stellar Horizons 1, each turn was a year, but now we're kind of zooming out and coming
for the planet stars. Movements quicker. I can imagine it's a whole new ball game if you actually if you could attain speed of light travel. I mean, that's a whole new dimension right there. So that changes the whole as far as exploration goes.
Totally. The final technologies in Stellar Horizons 2 are near light travel, basically. So it's kind of almost going the speed of light, assuming you can accelerate to very close to the speed of light very quickly. The second reason why it needs to span this long time, and why it have 10-year turns, is because one of the most important parts of the game is actually modifying your own species. So the idea is we all are humans, Stellar Horizons 2 starts, each faction is a faction from Earth. So they all start as Earthlings, right? And over time, you can actually genetically modify your species to
That'll be
kind of
fun.
better suit different
I'm going to sign
environments
up
and
for that
stuff. So
right
you
now.
can, yeah, so you can specialize in like
Yeah.
aquatic worlds or desert
Yeah.
worlds or
That's
something like
great.
that, right? And you can modify your species. You can make them better at you can make them more intelligent. You can make them better at trade. You can make them better at ship design. You can do all these cool things, which I thought was, just super cool. So that's one of the most fun things is actually just
Yeah.
modifying your species, and you can also modify your fleet in certain ways. So you can kind of go towards more trade or go towards more settlement or go towards more combat or stuff like that. So you can really modify your own species, which I thought was just super fun. And so because the other thing about just science fiction in the future is when I was a kid, I was really into Star Trek because you can meet all the aliens. And I do believe there are probably aliens out there, but for various reasons, I don't think there's a lot of other alien cultures that we're going to meet that are near our technology, right? Like in Star Trek, where
I'm
there's
still
the
blown away
Klingons,
that we
the
haven't had
Romulans.
really true contact with aliens. I mean,
Right.
everybody
And,
says, I don't think they exist because they would have been here already. Or
yeah, Fermi paradox. Yeah, where are they?
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. So on that basis, there probably aren't a lot of other intelligent civilizations that could visit us or we could interact with. So therefore, and my kind of idea of the future is that eventually we will have
yeah,
aliens, but they will all start as humans and they'll modify themselves over time, and we'll have humans spread out throughout the galaxy, all kind of becoming these
yeah.
different subspecies and which
So
is exactly how speciation works.
So do you think there's any history we've had documented that could be a reason to say there are aliens, or could be aliens earlier, like say the pyramids?
Yeah,
People have
yeah.
said, well, the pyramids are a result, or there's Atlantis and other things, but not that they're advanced civilizations from Earth, but actually from aliens that are not originating from Earth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a real science kind of hard science kind of person, and I would say it's not impossible, but it's a very high bar to prove that. And I get asked this question a lot,
Yeah.
and I would say unless we find super compelling evidence of such thing, it probably hasn't happened. That being said,
Yeah.
it's not impossible, and I think there are, just because of the vast scope, billions and billions of planets, there
Yeah,
probably are other
You would think the
species out
odds. You
there.
think the odds when we're talking billions of, I guess we're
Yeah.
talking about millions or billions of Earth-like, well, number of people in the world. So whatever that number is now, I've lost track of what the number in the billions is, but
8 billion. Yeah.
8 billion. So we're talking about more than 8 billion Earth-like planets. I mean, what are the odds that they're
Right.
not going to have that technology, and then also not die or not kill each other off? I don't know how big a factor that would be as well.
Well,
So
yeah, that's the key thing. There's so many steps. You have to
yeah,
have the development of life, and then you have to have the development of intelligence, then you have to have the development of technology, then you have to have like interstellar technology, and there's all and not destroy yourself. So there's so many levels to get there, right? And
yeah.
so and multicellular life versus single cell life, like for
Mm,
most of the planet or the history of Earth, we had life on Earth, but it was single cellular. So you're
mhm.
not going to find, I actually think that's probably what you're going to find is lots of bacteria out there, lots of kind of algae planets. And that's the thing in Stellar Horizons too. When you go to different star systems, you go
Yeah,
and explore different stars, and you find different types of planets. So some are Earth-like, some are desert, some are barren, some are gas giants. You have, I think, 12 different types of worlds you can find, asteroid belts and
right.
all kinds of things, oceanic planets. And then you can find anomalies, which are different features, right? And so you can
Right.
find, one of my favorites was inspired by Moana, actually, because my daughter watched it. There's a great line, you'll never expect a demigod to beat a decapod. So one's like a decapod infestation, which are like crabs and stuff, and there's millions and millions of species of decapods on Earth. So I think there's probably lots of planets out there with basically crabs.
I've heard some crazy. I've heard some
Yeah.
crazy things. Oh my gosh! I just heard from this is really off the wall for a Kickstarter for a science fiction game. So apologies to everybody, but we'll wrap it up with this. But I remember Joe Rogan brought up a discussion about, they looked up online about mushrooms and spores that aren't from Earth that might explain intelligence, life for humans, how we evolved based on these mushrooms from, again, not from Earth, aliens somehow got here, and just crazy stuff. So there must be so many theories out there. I can't imagine how many there are. But no, this is a great introduction to the game. I hope everybody enjoyed. Just to get the background about yourself, Andrew. Obviously, we did a quick introduction of the game, Still Horizons 2, Galactic Frontier. And what we're going to do for part 2 is we're going to go through the game system in detail. So everybody that's watched this first episode, if you're watching live, get ready to watch our part 2 coming up shortly, which will cover the game system itself and get into some game mechanics. Or if you're watching this after Kickstarter, you can watch both right away. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today for this first segment. I look forward to talking to you more about Stellar Horizons 2 in our next segment.
Thank you.
Thank you.